So I think spotting the right people, not trying to do everything yourself. Again, serial entrepreneurs, see, either you can do it all yourself or you can invest in people who will do it. And I keep saying that everything that I do in the investment sphere, I actually do to stay young in my mind. I mean, I stay young because I'm able to find new ideas that excite me tremendously, talk to people, understand their hypothesis, see how I can help them. And I mean, I wrote this the other day saying that, your job as an entrepreneur is to roll up your sleeves and say, how can I help? Don't think of your investment as a position of privilege. You've been given membership of someone else's dreams. Help build that dream.
Today's guest needs no introduction. One of India's finest orators and storytellers, Roshan Abbas, is an actor, TV and radio host, producer, event manager, creative, film and theatre director, lyricist, CEO, angel investor, serial entrepreneur, author, public speaking coach. Welcome, Roshan, to the podcast.
Thank you. I've already taken 1.5 minutes of your podcast time with just the number of things that I have done. And I often get very embarrassed when people read that because I'm like, Acha, many of these things I've done along the way. But yeah, but they sort of all add some aspect to my life. So thank you. I'm glad to be here. I've been hearing the podcast. I enjoy a lot of the episodes. And in fact, I've in fact started reaching out to one or two of the people via that podcast as well, because it's great to get some wonderful insights from your podcast. So I'm glad to be here.
So, Roshan, since you mentioned, so many, there are many aspects of you, and
Yeah.
people recognize by with you with, as an actor, director, entrepreneur, CEO. So, let's start with how did you go about, mastering so many skills?
Yeah. So what I ended up doing was that I think creators are naturally curious people, and I'm extremely curious. But with that curiosity, I came from a small city like Lucknow, and when I had finished off from school and I was moving to Delhi, I was this PCB kind of student who wanted to be a doctor, but also enjoyed theater and writing and debating, dramatics, everything. So I managed to convince my parents that I'm going to start doing, I'm going to try. And I'm talking 1988, when there was nothing called mass media as such which existed. So I had to convince my parents to allow me to do something which genuinely didn't exist. And they were extremely fine giving me that opportunity. But when I came to Delhi, I think ever since then in my mind there has been this ticking clock that tells me, I have a limited amount of time. So initially I had 3 years, and I wanted to pick up as much as I could in 3 years. And that's where there's a simple philosophy of just saying yes and jumping in. I say no to very few things. I genuinely like to spend time with people. I like to learn from them, and I don't just have conversations. I normally take those conversations, and then in my mind, I spend some time actually taking notes from conversations. So I have I'm in my phone directory, and notes are filled with things that I have picked up. Sometimes I look back at notes which would be from 1995, 97. I've got diaries in school which have got small little things. So I think just this thing of assimilating what you come across and not just going across the surface and skimming across the surface is something that I did. When I have sort of assimilated these things, I then maybe compartmentalize them somewhere inside me of saying, I will put this to use. My parents are both teachers, and my father used to always say that experience is a key that life gives you that you don't know when you might use. So I keep a lot of these learnings with me. And again, as a creator, the other journey I had was that I kept looking at larger platforms. So, see, when I started in Lucknow, I had a very small audience. The audience was the 200 people who used to fit into the Spence Hall in my school. And then I went to Ravindralaya, where there were 1,000 seater. And then I came to Delhi, where I started getting, Siri Fort, which was 2,000 seater. But then I get onto radio when I'm talking to a city. Then I get onto television where I'm talking to a country, and so I think every time that scale of content opportunity in terms of audience kept increasing, and for that I had to acquire new skills, because each of these requires a very different skill. but it's a complementary skill, right? I mean, on radio you learn how to be able to speak well, engage an audience, but there is no visual, so you start telling stories in visuals a lot more. The minute you switch from that and you go on to television, you suddenly have to do a lot more about the persona, about what you are as a person, and therefore you start building a different skill. In fact, I think storytelling on television is a skill that I built over a period of time. Um, and and then when I had to convert these ideas into the businesses that I was building, honestly, I believe I did an MBA on the job. I did an MBA while conducting events for the best CEOs and CMOs in the world. And again, I put back that same habit: listen, assimilate, and then put into action.
And if you can go through your journey, right? How did you identify what's the next step for you?
Yeah. Um, Good question, because very often what happens is I think there are two things to it. One was the fact that sometimes I jokingly tell people that the passion economy has parallelly been created while I was on my journey. So when I came out in 95, 93, 94 was a time when I was still experimenting after mass communication. But when I came out, I put on the radio one day and I heard somebody talking on FM. Now this person was had a good voice but wasn't engaging as a communicator. So I often tell people that you end up having a problem, but do you do anything to solve it? I have this thing: if I find a gap and I find a solution for it, then I must implement it. So the very next morning I went to All India Radio and I found a way to get inside, meet the station head, and convince him to give me a slot. And this thing about saying, take a chance on me. I just turned to him and I said, listen, I love FM. I think it's a great medium to communicate with the youth, but the people you have on it are too old to be able to speak the language of the youth. So can I get that opportunity? And when he threw the gauntlet at me and said, okay, can you do a show in 2 days? Now, here is where most people creatively will say, let me think about it. I'll come back. No, for me, it is, it's that Richard Branson thing, screw it, let's do it. So I genuinely just jump in and I was like, I'll do it. And in 2 days, I'd produced the show and put it out. Now, the minute FM happened, and I was now becoming the voice for Delhi at that point in time. Television had just started, and TV 18 with Raghav Behel and Sanjay Ray Chaudhary was also starting. They were Racy was a couple of batches my senior in mass communication, and they were launching new age television in India. So unlike Doordarshan, they were launching these shows which were like Public Demand. They were launching Tufan Mail. They were launching game shows, you name it. And again, the minute they reached out to me and said, will you be a part of this? I felt that if I want a larger audience, I must move from radio to television. But I didn't leave, I didn't abandon radio. I continued doing radio. I just limited the number of hours I was doing. And then I started doing time on radio, on television. Television, because it made me a household face, I suddenly became the in demand anchor who people would reach out and say, can you anchor our event? Again, many of my contemporaries who are still very dear friends of mine on television, they were very busy building a showcase of their life, right? What's the car I drive? What's the house I live in? What do I wear? I am not concerned with all of these things. I am just concerned about how big is the canvas on which I can play. And so when I used to go and host events, I used to constantly see this gap between what was promised by an event manager and what was delivered. And as the host, in between, I would be the guy saving this. So again, I could just continue with that same opportunity because it pays really, really well, and you don't hold. I mean, you walk in without any baggage, you leave without any baggage. But I had now found a problem to address, and I felt that a lot of live event communication was theater done with a slightly business-led objective, right? I mean, the objective was to launch a product. The objective was to maybe have an IPO. The objective was to do a press event or whatever. So if you understand the business outcome that was required, then it is a matter of what were the ingredients required to deliver it. And I knew these ingredients. So frankly, we put together Encompass as an agency in the early days purely because we knew people in theater, in film, in radio, actors, writers, producers, singers. And I would get all of them together and be able to come up with a brand new solution which nobody had. Now, this started leading to us having, stupendous growth. I remember, I think within 2 years, we were about I didn't even know how many zeros there were in crore. I must tell you, like, so when somebody said oh my God, 10 million, somebody said, oh my God, you've done a crore. I'm like, what? You know, it was as crazy as that. Now, again, you can't have every skill. Then you just hire for the right skill. My first CEO was actually a lady who's called Sue Fertal, one of my best friends now. She's in Hong Kong. But she had worked in Saatchi and she knew what it was like to run an agency. And so I quickly turned and said, this is a skill set you have. My skill set is creative. My skill set is connecting with artists, etc. Let me do that. Sukrit, who was my partner at that point in time in the business and who was a great creative director, he also, being a partner in the firm, took a step back and said, no, we need a professional CEO. And many creative firms run on, a little bit of spirit and a lot of bhaichara. But what we did was that we bought in systems, and these systems then made people a little more accountable. And again, creativity that is accountable is something that I think is very important. I often tell people that don't just be dreamers, be doers to some degree. So I think this event agency was a brilliant decision to take, because while it required a lot of investment of time, many risks that one had to take, I had very often to put my own reputation and even my money on the line if required. But this actually led us to become a company that was a highly creative, but was also recognized for a great culture. We built a great creative culture in Encompass, and this started making us now become highly noticed, because in our work in the creative line, very often, the culture leads to great content. The great content leads to great rewards and awards, which leads to great reputation, and then everybody seeks out that reputation, and that reputation started leading to great revenue. And by 2007, I knew that we were now poised for great things. And, my partner turned and said, listen, how long are we going to do this? And I said, listen, I do this part time, because I was still doing radio, I was still doing television. But he was a full time CEO of this business. And I said, what do you want? And he said, we want to leave a legacy behind. We want this company not just to run for us, but to run for everybody who's here. And we had been people started approaching us for partnerships or for investment or for buying some of our equity. So for 7 and 8, actually, we went through this whole cycle of being courted by the biggest agencies in India. One day we would be in Russia having meetings. The next we would be getting calls from London. The next we would be sitting with Colvin Harris of JWT. And frankly, that was a fun time, because we were the first professional event agency that ended up doing an alignment with a great advertising major. Um, that's what happened in 2008. So I think suddenly converting this personal journey into building an enterprise, and that enterprise, again, even today I do the same thing. I will identify a problem, and then I will find a bunch of people saying, let's solve this. you know and I think that's what entrepreneurs do very often. I mean, we there's something that pains us, there's something because of which we can't sleep at night, and then you're thinking, how can I solve this? And that's what I did. 2008, after selling Encompass, suddenly there was this money that I was sitting on. And again, it doesn't make me any difference what car I used to always joke and say that how well dressed is your mind, right? That's more important to me. What does that, where does your brain hang out, is more critical to me as a person. And so I started seeking new things to do and new people to meet. Rajesh Soni, who was a very old friend of mine, and he was in radio in the early days when I was on radio. He was in sales and I was the jockey, and we were good friends. Rajesh reached out to me at around this time and said, listen, I'm getting a bunch of investors from Europe who run something called Founders First, and I don't know how to do an event. Will your company put together the event? And I said, say no more, I'll get it done. When I went to attend the conference, I did the same thing. I listened, I assimilated, and then I said, my God, I've got to put this into action. So I turned to Rajesh and I said, this sounds very interesting. How does one do this kind of startup investments? And Rajesh said, would you like to be involved? And that's when I jumped in. And frankly, it has been one of the richest experiences of my life, because I get to work with some fabulous angels. B, I get to meet some incredible ideas and people, young people with great ideas, etc. And the portfolio is done well, which obviously one doesn't mind. A lot of what I learned at GSF, I started applying to the other things that I was doing. So this investing into people or investing into their ideas is something that then followed me, because I actually took a break in 2009 and 2010 to make a movie. So I was there, big old Bollywood. Shah Rukh Khan was my producer. I was having a lot of fun. And working again with young, fresh talent. Even there, I think I had a startup mentality. I wanted to work with freshers. So all the four actors in my film were freshers. They were first timers. There was Ali Fazal, there was Satyajit Dubey, there was Gisele Montero, who'd just done a small role in Love Ajkal, and there was Zoa Morani. And and working with these young people and a young crew was so exciting. While I was doing the film, I suddenly realized that the film I was making for a production house like Red Chilies, it was an experiment they were doing, because this was a 6-7 crore movie. Now imagine, counter, juxtapose that with a Ravan which Shah Rukh was making, which was 100 crores plus almost at that time. So like, I mean, I could have made 12 of those, of the films that I was making. So it was a small film. We were experimenting, and at the end of the film, I ended up meeting two people, because I frankly had no money left to do the titles of my film, and I was like, I want a particular kind of title for my film, and these two young boys, Varun and Rohit, were running an agency called The Glitch, and I called them over. I'm also a good seller of dreams, so I actually turned to these two boys and said, "How would you like to see your name in the credits of a film?" That's how I started. But they were like, "Oh, that sounds really good. We've never been in a movie credit." I said, but my problem is I need a great set of titles. I don't have the money. What I can offer you is I can offer you beer, biryani, and business advice for 6 months to a year, as much as you want. And they laughed and said, we'll just do this with you. And I remember going to their one room little, they had an apartment out of which they were working, and one iMac from which we were looking at film titles. And it just looked really beautiful. And the film got made, it released. Varun and Rohit started meeting me very regularly. And after a couple of months, I realized that they were onto something really big, because they were digital creators at a time in 2011 where there was nothing called a digital creator. So I actually started going to JWT and WPP and everybody I knew, said, guys, these are people you should invest in today. And when they said that, listen, we would love to, but we want to invest in mature businesses, I picked up all that I had learned from Rajesh in GSF and said, maybe I can become a part of this. And I was about to do that when actually Varun and Rohit reached out and said, hey, we really like working with you. It's fun because you're giving us thoughts that we didn't have before. And again, I was more a mentor partner to them. I was an investor as well. And I came in and I invested a very small amount of money. I understood that one of their problems was that they needed a cash flow that would keep flowing. So I came in and I invested money in the Glitch, and I gave them a little bit of a credit line. We got them out of one or two businesses that sounded very sexy, but they weren't making enough money. I did think they were big revenue lines for us for the future. And over 2011 to 2018, they built one of the best digital agencies in India. And 2018, we again sold this to WPP. And each time you do these kind of journeys, so like again, I have so many parallel journeys going on. So here is Glitch that is running, here is Encompass that is running. Both have been sold to WPP. 2015, I met this guy again through Rohit called Pranay. And Pranay Swaroop came to me with an idea where he wanted to run an influencer marketing agency. Now, again, in 2015, influencer marketing was too early, but I somehow, many people say that, I have an ability to be able to put a telescope and look into the future. So again, I said, no, influencer marketing is going to be big, and I invested in this company, and we sold that. Like, I mean, we've just done a deal with QU, which is a Canadian group dealing with that same thing across the US. So I think spotting the right people, not trying to do everything yourself. Again, serial entrepreneurs. See, either you can do it all yourself, or you can invest in people who will do it. And I keep saying that everything that I do in the investment sphere, I actually do to stay young in my mind. I mean, I stay young because I'm able to find new ideas that excite me tremendously, talk to people, understand their hypothesis, see how I can help them. And I mean, I wrote this the other day saying that, your job as an entrepreneur is to roll up your sleeves and say, how can I help? Don't think of your investment as a position of privilege. You've been given membership of someone else's dreams. Help build that dream. Um, so I think that actually, a very very long answer to your question, but I mean, again, I just get stuck saying which part of the journey do I speak of.
And people look at it inside and say that Roshan Abbas is able to spot trends. But if I look at your journey, it's actually you are just curious. You are talking to new people. You are experimenting with ideas, and you happen to jump onto something which nobody else has done. It may work, and most of them might not work, but it just keeps you energized. It just uh, uh, gives you a shot at solving good problems which are happening for the first or the second time. And that's how I think leads to 7 to 8 year journey, which then people call, hey, Roshan Abbas is able to right. So
Also, I think there are two parts to it. One is obviously that, see, I am deeply invested in this whole
yeah.
media and content and creative space. But again, as you rightly said, I listen, I pay attention, and I keep saying that, be interesting or be interested. Now, being interested is all about sitting down and listening to someone else's idea, and I will go to conferences. I'll travel to South by Southwest with a little backpack and just go from room to room because I want to know. When OML started this wonderful conference called the Coalition, I used to go there and I used to hang there almost saying, hey, what can I help with? I don't want to walk into a room ever with this demeanor of, oh, I'm this and I built this and I made this. I want to be as curious and as, at sometimes even, just almost as naive as the person sitting next to me and say, hey, let's explore things and let's do things together, because I think that's the joy of the journey. um, and the other thing, like for example, in GSF, there are such wonderful people who are having conversations or whatever. Now, sometimes when you look at saying, okay, when this is the guy who built India Mart, and here is Rajesh, and here is somebody who's a serial entrepreneur from the valley. I take a back seat and I'll jump in on the things that I know well. I know how to market your brand. I know how to tell your story better. I know what are the trends in terms of stuff that is happening in terms of media. Should you be putting ads on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, or where is it going? These are areas of interest for me, and I will jump in and advise. But other things that I don't know, I stay back and I let the group decide, and that's it. And I think Rajesh is a great friend to have, of course, along with Sanjeev and everybody else who are there in the group. And it's just great learning.
Roshan, at any point in time, right, because of what reputation you have built, the success which you have, you might be getting pitched 10 ideas, right, to partner with, to invest with. How do you choose one or two? Because as I see in your journeys, there have been two or three parallel streams which you worked on, but they were not like 15 or 20 streams, right, which you worked on. Two, three parallel. So how do you choose these three parallel streams, let's say, which you are working on right now?
So I think, see, what happens is that, again, as a curious creator, there are problems that I am constantly in my head trying to solve. For example, right now we are spending so much time doing virtual communication. How will we solve for the human need of socializing? Now, I know this is a problem that somewhere I keep thinking about. So, if anybody approaches me with a solution to this, I know that I will find that to be interesting. The future of live entertainment is something that is a area of concern. So, I think this is one bucket that I'm interested in. The second is, on most virtual communication, I see that people's attention drops. I am very interested in seeing how people will keep people engaged, and therefore, what are the tools they are building? What is the technology they are building? Um, I deeply believe in the creator economy, and I believe that every creator has the circle of intimacy. So, what they used to talk about is the thousand true fans. But I think, it's not about the thousand true fans. I also know that there are people who are monetizing, 100 people. But if you can monetize those 100 people for 10,000 rupees each, that too is a great income, right? I mean, and I'm seeing people do things like that on a monthly kind of basis. So When I notice this and I still feel that that same person is doing one Substack newsletter, one podcasting workshop, one podcast on the side, also, writing a book. Now, what is a technology solution for this? Who is going to help build the tech stack for the creator? Deeply interested. So when I find these as areas personally, I engage with this. Commune, which I have been building over the last couple of years, is a platform for young creators, and it just tries to say how can we empower creators to be their best self. So, community building tools is something that again are of deep interest to me. So these are just one set of area of interest for me. The other thing, of course, is that when I see trends that are happening, okay, right? For example, I think young people's way of investment is completely changing. So when I see a lot of fintech startups, I look at what their narrative is. I obviously one is looking at what is the problem they're trying to solve, but I'm also concerned about the fact of what's the interface they're building. Because I think I have a slightly more of an eye for saying, so what is that soft tissue of connectivity that you're building? Is it the interface? Is it the language? Is it design? Is it UI UX? And these things really, engage me personally. Somebody approached me just a day or two back with something saying nobody is creating content for 3 to 6 year olds. And I said, yes, definitely. I do believe that deep inside there is the circle which is content led that excites me, and whatever other various ramifications. If there's something else that as an idea intrigues me, I immediately put it on to Rajesh and other people saying, hey, listen, this sounds interesting to me. I find it interesting for the following reason. Would you like to have a look? Frankly, sometimes I may miss out on a couple of good deals that land up in my inbox because if you can't engage me in an email, somehow I'm not. I don't. I lose a little bit of interest. I've now started getting one or two other people to have a look at them as well. But if you can't engage me, I think my bias as a communicator comes out saying, would I love to spend an evening with this person otherwise? Beyond the thing, what if it fails? Would I still like to spend that evening with you? Would I sit and have a drink with you and chat about life? Because I think that's the important aspect as well.
Roshan, now coming back again to your process, right? You said you have been very active note taker, right? That's one part of your process, right? How do you assimilate ideas from many streams and then combine them together? What are the other processes that help you in your life as a creator, as a businessman, and now as an angel investor?
I think one process is that I deeply believe in is that I keep hiring my own replacement in everything that I build. I'm always trying to groom new leaders, and I then let them go on their path. Many people, when they turn and say, "Oh my God, you're running 6 businesses," I said, "No, I'm not running them. I had a vision for some of them. Some of them I partnered in someone else's vision. I will provide what I can and get out of the way. You've got to get out of the way. That's a very important thing. So I think trying to inspire the team and say this is what our big vision is, this is what our moonshot is going to be. That's one thing that I like to do with my teams. I like to check in with all my teams, on a constant kind of basis. That's one thing that I definitely do. The other thing as a creator is I go down rabbit holes often. I give myself actually about 2 hours every day to just explore. I will listen to the vaguest podcast and then I will go to someone's Substack newsletter and then I will go into one investment hypothesis and someone's tweet. And all of this, this is again, I keep saying, what do you feed your mind? Because, you know, if that plant needs to grow, what is in its roots? What is nurturing the roots is so important. So I think that is a very important thing. I just put out some hacks of productivity for people because somebody was saying, "How do you do so many things together?" And I said, "Guys, while I remain deeply curious, I also am almost militant in getting rid of things that could actually be distractions. So notifications, WhatsApp groups, emails which you need to unsubscribe from, all of these things. I just do this so that I can keep clearing up time. There is a process I actually learned many years ago. There are two things that I like to do. One is that, while people talk of a work life balance, I came across And this was one online course that I did from some university. So that Simply Learn, I think, was the website I did it from. And in that leadership course, there was a very interesting thing where they said that, don't just think of your life as a work life balance, think of four quadrants. The quadrants are family and friends, there is work, there is self, and then there is community at large. And I try to find time for each of these. And I keep telling people that me time is very, very critical. Um, in order to, there is a quote which I think it's a Bruce Lee quote somewhere, which says that, if you want to fill your cup with tea, you must first empty it. So it's very important to distill, empty, and therefore I spend a little bit of time just clearing up things. Otherwise we get into this muddle where there's too much going on. Um, these are a couple of the things that I do. When I'm investing, I have learned again something from my friends, which is I look for answers to a couple of questions. One is, what's the problem you're trying to solve? How big is the problem you're trying to solve? Why are you the right person to solve it? If you can answer these three questions for me first, I'm genuinely interested. And then after that, of course, one starts looking at what your team is and what you want to build and what's the kind of culture. And the more you spend time with the person, you understand what that person is doing. So these are a couple of the things that I do. I also like to, like for example, now there's this whole thing about crypto and Ethereum, etc. I have identified one or two people who I'm currently just following to understand it better. And I like to do this. I like to spend some quiet time, learn, again, pick up whatever you can, assimilate it, build your own hypothesis, and then follow it through for a little while. um, Frankly, I was not much of a risk taker early, but the more money you end up making, I have this middle class habit of putting things aside. So, if you put aside enough for a rainy day, I believe that somewhere you reach something called an escape velocity. That escape velocity is when you're not, why do you achieve escape velocity? Because gravity doesn't hold you back. And frankly, this gravity that I talk of is the day to day troubles of, oh my God, where's my next paycheck coming from? Where is this coming from? What if I lose everything, etc., etc. So I think if you build that little nest egg and leave it aside, ultimately, what do you need? I mean, I think with age, you end up getting a little more philosophic. So frankly, you need a little bit of food for your body, a little bit for your soul, some people you can share these things with. And I guess we're all somewhere obsessed with a little bit of wanting to leave a mark behind, which I do believe is something that sometimes comes up in my head occasionally. Uh, but apart from this, really, money is a means to live so many dreams and so many other people's dreams, and that's what I keep doing.
And we talked about things, that worked. Can you share the things that didn't work? The initiatives
Oh,
you
oh,
tried.
absolutely, absolutely. I must tell you. So, and in fact, it's a very good thing that you've asked me, because what happens is that sometimes people get into this whole place of, oh my God, one success after the other. No, I think it's very important to talk of failures. I invested in a news company where somebody had worked in another company and said, this is a great app, and the one question I forgot, while I realized the problem the person was solving, I just forgot to say, so what's your source of news going to be? And oh, we'll just pick it off from websites or whatever, etc. And I said, work on that, because you just can't pick up stuff from there. And it just went, so, didn't test it deep enough, just got so excited by the idea initially that I didn't dig deep enough. And sometimes not digging deep enough can lead you into digging a hole for yourself. So that is one thing. The other thing that, in fact, which didn't go well is that in the film business, sometimes you're not dealing with rational thought, you're dealing with egos. um, I was when I had finished my film, I was working with a company that was making designs for films, and I said, "Oh my God, this is a niche area, because each film spends nowadays a good 20 to 30 crores on marketing. A small film will spend 5 to 10 crores. Bigger films will spend a lot more." And I was like, "Oh my God, nobody targets just this. There are only 2, 3 agencies. Let's work on this as an idea." And I got 2, 3 friends together and we started working on it. And I realized this, that, if you really want to be in this industry, the reason there are such few companies is because, superstars want to do a review of a creative at 4 in the morning. And I don't want to be the person doing that. I'm not, I value my time, I value my peace. So I think sometimes if you realize that an area has been left alone and it's only being serviced by two three people or whatever, maybe there's a good reason that everybody else is not chasing that. So those are things that, I mean, these are one or two things that haven't worked. A couple of the things that we did at GSF in the early days, I think in the first 2 3 years, even Rajesh and the entire team and all of us, we were all a little, should I say, naive, or I mean, we were just well-meaning, and I think a little naive, and therefore we invested in a couple of things, but it was really early days. And now when I look at those same things, I realize that there are, oh, you should have asked them this, you should have done this, you could have helped in the following manner. Um, Even today, I think that our startup ecosystem is riddled with so many things, from, angel tax and what's going to happen on this, and should you build a company here, or should you, shift it and go abroad, and who's going to be your series A, or who's going to come in and support you. I think all of these questions, of course, do keep coming up. But I think over a period of time, even those mistakes are great teachers. Yeah. So, yes, one has made a couple of these mistakes. I mean, enthusiasm sometimes lands you on the, just pure enthusiasm lands you on the wrong time, but some wrong side. But then, you know, that's also a part of life. It's okay. It's not a problem.
But you also got so many opportunities because, as you said earlier in the podcast, you were a yes person. You were the
Yeah,
first person to say, "I'm ready. Yeah, I'll
absolutely.
jump in."
No, absolutely. And what happens is, again, uh, character and personality of the founders is a big thing for me. Simply because, and I keep telling people this: will you, on a bad day, be able to spend an hour with this person without thinking, "Arey, main kyun kar raha hu?" It's very important. And the other thing is, does your value system and that person's value system work together? I think I've been brought up with a lot of these things about values, and that's very important to me. So I keep looking out for, how can one solve that. One of the people who worked with me the other day said, we were looking at as a way of doing creative learning online, and there was a good hack that they were giving, saying, we can do it this way, and we can, we'll do the first thing free, and then people will come and then they will buy the master product and stuff. And I said, no, yeah, this sounds a little unethical. So this person turned and said, I want to make you a billionaire and you want to run an NGO. you know. And I said, it's fine. It's not, everything is not about money. It's a lot about, that again, quotable quotes keep coming to me too often on these things. But there is this line that I always remember, which says, do not mistake your net worth with your self worth. And it means a lot to me as an individual, because uh, it's what people will say when you're not in the room that really will matter. And if that is built on your self-worth, then there's nothing like it.
And if I may ask, let's say if we take a week of yours these days, how will you divide your week in various segments? Right?
So I'll tell you what I do. I do a couple. I almost do a weekly call with my team at Encompass, with my CEO there, Ranjit. I spend that time. I now have a good chief of staff who's just joined me recently, so he's sorting my life out a lot, because I was sort of getting a little bit into this muddle. I spend a lot of time, about 30% of my time, I spend with the commune team. I spend another about 20% of my time just exploring. So, I go out to see comedy shows, attend a seminar, go on to a webinar, all of this, etc. And I mean, I keep doing this regularly. Uh, all of the other things that I work in, whether it is, so I think once a fortnight we have a GSF call that goes on for about 2 to 4 hours, which, where we are updated on new ventures that we're investing in. I do try to meet at least one or two new companies a week. So some time goes in that. And for all the other companies, I think I circle in with them about once a fortnight or once a week. The rest of the time, frankly, my time is just going and thinking up creative ideas. Sometimes I'm writing, sometimes I'm just consuming stuff. And of course, I'm an amateur chef. I occasionally love to rustle up things. I like to spend time with the family. I really like meeting up with people. And because right now I'm in Dubai at the moment and I can step out and meet people, I'm making the best use of it, because this pandemic has gone too virtual for all of us, I guess, at some stage.
Roshan, you have seen the media evolve over the last 25 years, Right? There are very few people who have seen it as closely as you. The other person I can think of is Raghav Bahel.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah, you've seen radio, you've seen TV, and now you are seeing online OTT media. You're also one show with Prime,
Yeah.
and OTT is there. Then other platform like ShareChat is there, Pratilipi is there, right? How do you make sense of it, right? Where's the future going, so that those entrepreneurs who want to latch onto the new wave, right, can draw insights from this conversation.
So see the space of what is any medium is again delivering. Let's go back to the same thing that I said. So what's the problem you're trying to solve? What did OTT solve? OTTs solved the problem of saying I want my content anywhere, anytime, any type. Now all three things were not being solved by cable, right? Everything was appointment viewing. Everything was dictated by a certain set of rules and guidelines. Oh, this is what India wants to watch, which is rubbish. Niches exist. Why are there so many regional channels? Because people wanted content in their regional languages. But it's not just languages, it is also genres. And if you will start looking at the number of genres, this is the long tail where there will be hundreds of small genres. You don't need just that thing that everybody watches. You can also have the thing that just 10 people watch, but are they willing to pay enough for it? So I think there are still many niches that exist. The other thing that's happened is when there is too much visual fatigue, audio picks up. Audio has picked up because there were certain places where you could not be distracted visually. So in your car, when you were driving, why was most audio consumed as drive time? And that was a big suffering that happened. But when we started spending 7 to 8 hours on a screen, our mind said, my God, I need to shut my eyes and just listen, which is why podcast consumption went up. Now, all of these trends are going to continue. But, when I look at it, sometimes I was telling somebody the other day saying that what is Clubhouse? Clubhouse is audio being done in a conversational live manner, right? So this is like the live radio show that used to happen in FM. What is podcast? It is the recorded show we used to do on FM, but it is available to you at any given point in time, any length you want. I mean, I listen to Amit Verma at 3.5 hours, and I will listen to your show, which is roughly less than an hour, and I listen to something which is 3 minutes also. It's a matter of that. Are met tools which are constantly changing, so therefore attention spans are getting reduced. Attention spans were always low. It's not that it is a new phenomenon. It's just that people have started making good use of the fact that, oh, you don't want to watch something long, watch it for 10 seconds on TikTok, watch it for 30 seconds on Moj or, Takatak or anything which is available there. And I think there is a huge craving from tier 2 and tier 3 to say, give me the tools and let me show you what I can do. Some of the most amazing clips that I get to see every day are those of somebody sitting in a small village and cracking jokes with friends and doing something, etc. Or somebody giving you, simple tips on how to farm better or whatever, which is coming from somewhere, or a language tip or a dance. I mean, it's so crazy. I think that the gig economy will continue, but so will the creator economy. And my real big belief is that if you create enough tools, people will build themselves, audiences which can be 1,000 or 1 million, and they can monetize off both. So build frictionless ways for people to consume and discover, and you will really reap rich rewards for this. Plus, I think there is a huge gap of finding good tools that exist in the languages that people speak. What has Alexa or Siri or OK Google done for us? For a whole generation, it is no longer important to learn how to write. Today, a person can turn and say, "2 kilo aata bhej dena." It will come. You can turn and say, "News bata dena." It will be there. So writing is disappearing. So there are such dramatic changes that are taking place in all of this. The only warning that I give people is often all mediums end up at some time becoming a little bit of a well in which you hear your own echo. Therefore, don't get stuck in just one place. Travel often, I mean, mediums and books and websites and blogs and newsletters are all trapdoors that lead you into new worlds. Make sure that you exist in at least a couple of them. Otherwise, this thing of, oh, you just keep listening to your own voice in one place is going to become a terrible problem for us.
Roshan, storytelling has been a very important part of your life. Uh, that's why you became a radio jockey, a TV host, even a director, because you wanted to tell stories, right? And you have also written a book about it.
Right, true.
It's also told in startup world that if you are not a good storyteller, it's very difficult for you to raise money because the other investor is listening to 10 pitches a day. Uh,
Yeah.
Uh, if you can summarize, right, storytelling for entrepreneurs, three or five things which they can start working on how to improve their storytelling.
So remember, I often tell people that a very critical thing is what's the hook. Each of your episodes, you begin with something which was really catchy in the episode, right? That's how you do it because you want to hook the listener in. Entrepreneurs should always have that hook which they know is going to catch people. I remember Guneet Monga once saying that she had made a film that wasn't working, but she went to college principals and sold it to schools to view because she used to enter every place and say, "This film will change your life." Right? So having a great hook is important. People like to hear stories of people. So try to make your business problem, personify your business problem into the life of a problem. I want to hear of Raju, I want to hear of Kavita, I want to hear of Mr. Shastri, I want to hear of, Colonel Singh or whatever, rather than hear of a man who's 63, demographic C, D, E. Right? So humanizing your stories is a critical thing to do. Business stories are different from stories because business stories have goals and objectives. Be clear with what your goal and your objective with your story is. Test your narrative on five friends and check what landed with them. And I keep saying, learn to meta tag your stories. This is a story that talks about entrepreneurship. This is a story that talks of my risk taking ability. This is a story that talks about how good my team is. This is a story that talks about how sharp I am in terms of finding things. This story tells that I'm a crisis solver. I keep saying that every person must know an origin story, a turning point story, a failure story, and a success story. Because if you don't have enough of these stories in your arsenal, then you're not going to be interesting. um, Always remember that you're carrying multiple billboards around with you. Your billboard is your social media profile, and make that interesting because that is perhaps the first place. After I receive a mail from you, after I hear you, most people, most smart people will go and try and find you. And if everything you put up there, sinks into the sea of sameness, as I call it, you won't stand out. So learn to do all of these things. Also respect the person who you are going to be telling your story to. Know their story. You build this connectivity by respecting the person in front of you. There is a line again I use in my workshops often saying, show me that you know me. you know it's so important. Don't just start telling your own story. Can you link your story with the other person? Right? And that's what works really, really well. Stories should always, as I said, have this thing about being linked to an outcome. Are you seeking investment at the end of the story? Are you seeking a follow-up meeting? Are you seeking, the person to join you? Know these objectives. um, I often give an example, which is something that I keep turning and saying that, I show a visual in my workshops that there's a person holding up a sign which turns and says, "Can you give me a ride to Texas?" And on the other side is the same man holding the same sign and it turns and says, "Can you give me a lift so I can go home for Christmas?" You know, it's just that stories are data wrapped with, given meaning by wrapping them in the right context. So, so these are just a few things that I tell people in my workshops, and if you ever have the time, attend one. It's great fun. I mean, I've now built quite a thing around it over the year. It's another problem that I was trying to solve, because, as you said, many people don't know how to tell their story, and that used to pain me. And I'm like, come on, you've got such a great product, have a great story around it.
Thank you so much, Roshan. I learned so much, through this podcast.
I hope so, because I was actually, having listened to everything else, I know that people keep talking about market and this and whatever, and I said, I'm not that person, but I do believe that all this equally matters, when you're building your ventures, etc. So I hope, Start, it was of some help to you.
Thank you so much, Roshan. It's a pleasure to host you on the podcast.
Thank you, and all the best.